Hey there, music maker. Just want to let you know before we dive into the episode today to head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast so you can get notifications whenever we go live on Facebook and record these episodes. It's a great way to interact with me, Magnus, and our special guests in the moment as these episodes are being recorded, and we'd love to have you on board. So once again, head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast. All right, let's dive in. Hey there, music makers. I'm Hayes Griffin, and welcome to Mandolin Secrets Live, a bi-weekly show where we take a deeper look at what's happening in the world of mandolin secrets, and in this case, lessons with Marcel. This week, we are welcoming special guest Marcel Ardans of lessonswithmarcel.com to the show. Marcel, as many of you probably know, is a guitarist, teacher, and YouTuber based just north of Raleigh, North Carolina. With over 28,000 subscribers, his website and YouTube channel are some of the best and most popular modern resources for learning bluegrass guitar out there. And I am so excited to have you with us today, buddy. How you doing, Marcel?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. That was a great intro, man. You kind of nailed that.
Well, dude, you know, I had to be on my A game with such a big shot here today. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
no, it's a good one.
That's great. Well, so for those of you out there, if you aren't familiar with Marcel, I kind of stumbled upon him real early in the pandemic, because I was kind of, I was starting to work with Mandolin Secrets. I was looking, Marcel and I talk about this all the time. We kind of look at what the other people are up to in our YouTube sphere, and it's like, I like what this guy's doing. So I like cold called him with an email, was like, hey man, I'm setting up my website and yours looks awesome. Can you help me out? and like, Marcel's probably had this happen before too, right? Like there were just I always just kind of assume nobody's going to respond to those emails.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like less than 24 hours later, it was like, oh yeah, I'm using these plugins and this WordPress thing. And I was like, whoa, check it out. This is great. So first off,
the crazy
thanks.
thing, the crazy thing about that is that I get a fair amount of those. And every time I think like, man, I should just like copy this information down, like, so I can just copy and paste it next time. And I never do. If you've ever asked me those questions and I've emailed you back, I wrote that out by hand.
That's so awesome, man. Well, I wouldn't be offended even if I found out later that it was a form email that you had copied and pasted to me. The fact that you even responded was generous enough, man. That's great. Well, so I kind of asked Marcel on the show here today for a couple of reasons. I think I want to start out, Marcel, by asking you, can you just give folks out there a little bit of your bio and kind of the setup of your operation and all that stuff? Because I know a lot of folks are familiar with lessonswithmarcel.com, but like what happened before that and what led up to that and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course, man. So I found bluegrass kind of in a weird way. I found this compilation of a bunch of jam tunes, and I was super intrigued by the concept of bluegrass. And I started sorting everything into my favorite categories. And so, taking this song over here and put it on the playlist, that song, put it on the playlist. I was trying to create, I think I was burning CDs. I was trying to create like my master vision. And so after I had found everything that I liked, I looked up all the artists and I realized that almost everything was sung by Tony Rice. And I was like, who's Tony Rice? And I was like, oh, he's the guitar player. So I found Tony Rice not even knowing that he played guitar. And then it became like a huge obsession. So even though I was working other jobs, it was kind of this thing that was always in my brain. So when people weren't looking, I was on the computer, like trying to find guitar information, or, I'd come home and I'd stay up all night trying to figure this stuff out. And eventually I started playing bands, and then people started asking for lessons. And the very first poster that we made just said Lessons with Marcel at the top, and it said, learn bluegrass. And so when we went to make the website, it was like, what do we call the website? We call Lessons with Marcel. That's what's on the poster.
Keep it simple, right? The KISS theory. Keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah, but all of that happened maybe over 9 or 10 years. I think it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me that I discovered bluegrass. It became like a lifelong obsession.
Man, I'm so glad to hear that, because I have to say, as a player and teacher and all the same kind of stuff, like seeing your operation get off the ground and kind of blow up like it has. It's really inspiring, because we kind of got into this conversation. Marcel and I were on a chat last night where you kind of mentioned that this bluegrass, you didn't grow up with bluegrass. You know what I mean? You kind of started what we would call like later in the game,
Yeah.
So like I got to ask too, like just out of curiosity, what kind of stuff were you listening to and playing before you discovered the beautiful vocal stylings of Tony Rice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my dad's a drummer, and so growing up, he didn't have a drum set around the house. And maybe when I was 13, he got a drum set and started playing again. And so I ended up playing drums too, because it was kind of the only instrument that we had. And there was this local jazz drum teacher. His name was Mel Zelnick. And Mel is kind of, was like a jazz legend. He played with like Patti Page. He played with like, actually, as the jazz era ended, he played with people like Ray Charles and stuff too. So he played with a lot of really big names.
Dang.
And he gave me and my dad drum lessons. And so we would drive out into the middle of the desert, just hours. And we'd get to it was like multiple shacks that had been attached that they lived in. And there was, like 2 Slingerland kits sort of in this attic area, and we would take drum lessons. And so, I played a lot of jazz drums. And even as a kid, actually, I would go and play like workshops. We would sell Mel's method, like his book. And I would be like the sort of like the token child. So I'd be up there playing jazz drums, and it was like, look, even a child can do it. And that was me.
You brought the cuteness factor. It's like, you bring Marcel, we'll sell more books that way.
So after that, I kind of picked up lots of other things because I was just listening to, rock music. So my brother, his girlfriend broke up with him. He started playing guitar. And, whenever he was like playing video games, I was like, like sneaking over to like take the guitar so I could go learn how to play it. And, eventually I learned some bass. I learned some piano. I played upright bass in high school. Actually, in high school, I was in 9 music programs. I was in, let's see if I can name that. I was in band. I was in choir, and I was in orchestra, but I was in the ones after school too, which was chamber choir, chamber orchestra, and jazz band. And then there was 3 extracurriculars that I did. I composed music for our orchestra, and I conducted. And then I composed all the music for a school play. Which I didn't perform in. I just wrote all the music. And there was something else, man, but I can't remember. I mean, I could say like marching band I did too, but I almost didn't graduate.
That is ridiculous, man. That's awesome. Dude, I was just a slacker in like a side rock band when I was in high school, and I thought that was like hot stuff. Dang, man.
I did. We had a rock band in high school too. We used to gig all over town.
There's the 9th one, right? No,
right.
Yeah. That's great, dude. I'm so glad that I asked that question, because I didn't know as much about you as I thought I did beforehand. This is great, buddy.
That stuff, if you, I don't know, if there's any like young aspiring musicians out there, I think that that kind of information is actually really, really useful. You don't realize how helpful it is to like learn how other instruments work. And as a young musician trying to make money too, I played in a lot of pit orchestras for musicals, and that was a way to make money because I could read music and play a lot of instruments, and there's not a lot of guys down there, and they got to cover all the parts.
For sure. I did the same stuff in high school, and you're totally right. Like having those chops to read through some charts and kind of, in my case, fumble through some charts at least, that's like it comes in handy. And I mean, to tie that to what you do today, that's like indispensable, right? Like with the whole kind of transcription side of things. Oh, yeah. So I guess, let's pretend that we've got some listeners out there that haven't visited your website. Let's talk about that for a second. So Lessons with Marcel, in my opinion, one of the greatest treasure troves of modern bluegrass guitar works and transcriptions out there.
Thank you.
I think we were talking about, do you have something? It's like getting close to 1,000, right? Like in terms of the number of transcriptions that you have and stuff like that. So it's
we looked it up. I don't remember what it was though. I literally looked it up just to tell you, and I forgot.
Yeah, I think it was like 600 or 700. You know what I mean? Like we're getting there, buddy. That's crazy.
That was something that actually fans asked about. So we gosh, I don't even remember. I wish I could tell you what the tune was, but there was actually a tune that someone asked, like the first one, they were like, can you transcribe this? And I was like, yeah, probably. I listened to the recording and
Yeah.
wrote it down. And then I realized, oh, people would probably like to see a lot of this. Like there aren't a lot of bluegrass guitar tabs. So maybe I could do that. So it became like a series on the channel. Then it became something that we did on live streams. And then it kind of took over the website. Suddenly, like all the traffic to the website is like looking at the store. They're like, oh, can I get this tab? Can I get that tab? And I love it. I give it all away for free because most of it's not my arrangement, right? It's someone else wrote it, and it's like my interpretation, like as quick as I can write it down and as correct as I can get it done. It's like, there it is. It's out in the world.
Yeah. That's a great thing, man. So as far as like, I think I want to steer the conversation out there a bit, because the folks that we typically have listen to this podcast or watch the show live with us are musicians on some kind of educational journey. You know what I mean? They are the people that are going to your website, looking at the transcriptions and buying lessons and all that kind of stuff. Like, do you have any kind of advice or tips for people who are, kind of looking to do that themselves, or like dip their toe into the water of transcribing music? Because I know that's a big question I get all the time. Like, I used to run a transcription business, and I was almost got to the point where I was like, why don't you just learn how to do this stuff? You know what I mean? Because like, I think there's a lot to gain from it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do that to some people, by the way, where I just say, you should go transcribe it. And sometimes people get back to me and they have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a great piece of advice, and this is what I did too, is to whatever library you have access to, whether that's, a book of TR transcriptions or, Banjo Ben or something. If you have access to a library of tabs that sheet music that you can immediately access right now, you should take that and you should start dissecting it, because you'll find, like the same lick over and over again in a bunch of different breaks. So you see that break and you find that lick and you ask yourself, hey, is it in the context that it was before? Is that lick being used the same way? You look, and maybe it's always being used the same way. So in your brain, whenever this situation comes up, this lick might apply. Now, when you're listening to music, maybe you want to transcribe it, that situation comes up. Do they play the lick? Yes, they do. It makes the transcription process much, much easier. Actually, my recent video, the one that came out yesterday, I think it came out yesterday, that's called Combine 6 Licks, Create 1 Bluegrass Guitar Solo.
Yeah.
Is that exact property. It's this Tony Rice guitar solo that is literally, you can break up by 2 measure chunks, and it is the entire guitar solo. It's only 6 licks, and you will know that a vocal song has, is longer than 6 licks. So he has to use some of them twice even, which is crazy.
That's awesome, man. That's totally not the way that I learned how to transcribe music, but thinking back on it, it's like, dang, that would have been a heck of a lot easier if I had done that, because most of us have, like you said, either a library that we can access of tunes, or we've learned breaks before, right? So you've got this raw information, but it's more about like, you're kind of taking it from an analysis perspective at first, as opposed to just like absorb everything you can through your ears and write it all down and do this and that, right?
Well, I think that there's a lot of people who transcribe by kind of this hunt and peck method. They like listen to one section over and over again, and maybe they try to sing it, and then they try to find it on their instrument. They like maybe even they're just trying to listen to one note over and over again to find what that one note is. They're like testing all over their guitar. I think that's the worst thing that you can do, because it's not, the only thing that it's teaching you is like pitch discrimination. Like, can you recognize that a pitch is higher or lower, and can you find it? Maybe that is a really useful skill for you. But I think most people develop pitch discrimination pretty fast. You can tell if a note's higher or a little bit lower. You can tell if you're getting closer or farther away from a note. I think those are skills that people develop fairly quickly. So when you look at the other way to look at it, where you're looking for like commonalities, how things are normally used, that leads to fluency. That doesn't just lead to good transcription. That leads to like fluency with your instrument. You'll become a native speaker.
That's, yeah. It's like the equivalent if you're going to liken it to language, right? Just like focusing on one word conjugation as opposed to just like learning a bunch of phrases that you can actually like speak with other, like
Right.
Germans with or whatever. Yeah, that's crazy, man. I love that. Man, I'm
Can
learning all sorts of stuff.
Can I give you a musical example?
Please do. Here we go, people.
I think one really interesting example is how blue notes are used. So let's pick the minor third. How about? So if I'm on my G string, so you can do this on a mandolin or on a guitar. If I play open, second, and fourth, those are the first, second, and third degrees of the scale. Which means if I want to play a minor third, I have to lower the third. Now this note, it sounds wrong. It's got a lot of character to it, right? It's got a way that it likes to be used, and it's got a way that it likes to sound. And by analyzing a lot of breaks, I'll tell you what you find. I'm going to spoil the secret. The secret is that this note really likes to have a buddy around it. It really likes to have some kind of friend. So you see a lot of 3-4 open, or you see a lot of 3-2 open. It's almost always surrounded by a buddy. And as soon as you know that, well, when you hear that weird note in a song that you're transcribing, you know that it's probably paired with something else. And that kind of logic step is maybe not how like, really theoretical, analytical people think. I think it's how native speakers think. They're like, well, normally this happens. So I guess that.
Yeah. That's an amazing way of kind of thinking about it, man, because I think you're right that like a lot of, if you're thinking about the music theory side of things or people who are like maybe classically trained that dive into transcription and figuring stuff out, it's like pointillistic, because in my experience with the world of like classical pedagogy, they're not really exactly telling you to be aware of the chord changes or the harmony at all points in time or the like melodic contours and stuff like that. It's literally just like figure it out and play back what that is, Yeah. And I'm not knocking classical music too either. Like there are obviously different schools and a much broader representation of like classical pedagogy than what I just described. But generally I've seen that. So that's really awesome. My blue note needs buddies. And you always hear, I love that, dude.
Yeah, you can look at so many famous licks. Like this is the same notes, just an octave lower, but it's the thing. There's the blue note going up. There's the blue note going down.
Yeah, right? but it's never stay on the blue note, right? Like or not never maybe, but very rarely we should say, right?
Yeah, right. And you can actually, you can continue to build rule sets. So what happens if the rule is broken? How about what if the blue note doesn't have a buddy? What if it's just this? Well, this sounds really bluesy to me. It sounds like we've entered like a different tonal landscape. No longer are we like tied to major. This feels like it feels like actually playing blues. No longer feels like, blue notes need buddies. Hey, let's stay kind of major, relatively happy. This feels like a new sound.
Yeah.
This is just one note, right? There's 12 notes, right? They all have different kind of sonic properties. This is just one.
For sure, man. No, and I love this like sonic properties and kind of like when I was first exposed to this kind of thing, it was with my jazz guitar teachers and they were talking about like resolutions of certain notes. Like if you transcribe someone, you'll notice it's like, well, they always hit like the 13th, like the 13 on a chord, but that 13 typically always resolves down to a 5 or all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? There are like these rules of voice leading, like you said.
For anyone out there who's thinking like, well, I just use my ear. Why don't you just use your ear? Why don't you just feel it? What we're talking about is how people normally feel it.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you. If you're out there saying, hey, I just want to like feel it. I just want to play what works. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about maybe throw out some of the theory and just feel what works and get used to the patterns that operate well and use those patterns.
I love that you kind of phrased it that way, because one of the things that I always come up against when I have a student that I'm trying to, because like what we talked about could very easily be roped into that, like, like, I don't want to learn any music theory. I just want to learn how to play. That's kind of like implicit with like some of what you're saying there. Like I get a lot of people like that, and it's like,
Yeah.
we're not really focusing so much on the theory. That brief foray into theory, like you said, is a vehicle toward musical fluency and understanding. It's not, the focus isn't the theory. The focus is the end result, right? Like you playing good guitar.
You just said like a brilliant thing too, that the focus is the end result, because a lot of times when people go into theory, they think that they're learning music theory for the sake of music theory. Hey, I'm going to go learn a bunch of scales, but no one cares if you learn a bunch of scales. What's important is what you can do right afterwards, how you can apply this theory that you learned. What is the application? It's like the music theory is just this like hazy fog you have to drive through so you can get to your actual destination over here.
Of course. I love
you
that.
Don't drive into the fog and just park and be like, hey, let me hang out here.
Yeah. I
Don't do that.
Maybe you do, but then, yeah, you typically don't get better. That's so awesome. Marcel dropping all the knowledge on you people out there today. That's ridiculous, man. Man, I almost just want to like, okay, I'm ending the stream now. We've got enough to think about. No.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's great, man. So let's maybe take a bit of another kind of like shift here. I love this transcription stuff, and I think the listeners are going to get a lot of value out of that. But Darren is in the comments right now. He says Hayes has been holding back. Marcel's revealing all of my secrets out here. That's why we call it Mandolin Secrets, Marcel. Jeez, come on, man. No.
The secrets are coming out tonight, baby.
Yeah. No. Stealing my bread and butter, boy. No. That's great. But I kind of want to like, now that you've given us some of the tools, or like at least the mentality that you use for transcription. By the way, if you folks are listening out there, by the way, and you're like wondering, how do I find these wonderful transcriptions and learn more from Marcel, definitely check out his YouTube channel, Lessons with Marcel, and then go to lessonswithmarcel.com. That's where you can find all of his transcriptions. And like he said, they're all like free and available for you to download in the store. There are some paid ones in there, but I assume those are probably like your arrangements and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're my arrangements. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the deal, folks. Buy every single one of those, because this guy deserves all of your money for creating the largest pool of bluegrass guitar tabs out there, period. So like, go spend money in Marcel's store.
I also want to say that if you have anything that you want transcribed, you should come to the live stream on Tuesday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Blessed with Marcel YouTube channel, and you can suggest what you want transcribed. And I pick a handful of suggestions every week, and we do them right there live.
That's so cool. Those are some of my favorite like live streams to catch from you, because like or videos rather, to watch in your library, because Marcel does have like a voting system. You get to like, it's democratic, right? You can choose which of the 3 transcriptions you want. So
sometimes I'm a benevolent dictator. Sometimes I just pick the stuff I like. Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, yeah, it's more of like an oligarchical approach to it, right? Like that's
yes.
That's hilarious, dude. So I want to talk a little bit more now about you've got a record out, right? And I've been kind of spinning that on Spotify and stuff a lot recently. Let's talk a little bit more about like your musical career, Marcel the musician, not Marcel the transcription artist extraordinaire.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this recent album is weird. It's a little bit of a weird departure. If you're into traditional bluegrass, this might not be the album for you. I recorded a couple albums that I wouldn't call any of them traditional bluegrass, but I would say that they're much closer. Kind of that modern traditional sound. I guess neo-traditional bluegrass, we'll call it.
Yeah, I like that.
And one of those tunes actually became the Lessons with Marcel theme song, which is probably one of the more popular things that I'd put out. And so when we did this album, I had kind of been demoing a couple songs, and I'd been sending them to friends and thinking like, hey, do you think this is good? Is this worth it? I wasn't feeling super hot about anything. And actually with Jack Devereaux, you know Jack.
Oh, Jack. Hey, Jack, if you're listening, we love you, buddy.
Jack's a great fiddle player. He's the fiddle player on the album. But I was talking with him, and we were joking about the sound of Newgrass Revival, sort of this 80s drums, Phil Collins drums under bluegrass, and about how it's a little bit of a, I don't know, it's a little unexplored. There's like, there's like two Newgrass Revival albums that really do it. And then there's like a little bit of Bela Fleck stuff where like he's still leaning into that. And then they kind of ditched it, and no one's really done it since then. And and so I just took one of the songs that we've been demoing, and I put, sort of a bunch of 80 samples under it, and I just programmed a drum out real quick because I don't have a drum set here. And I sent it to everyone, and we all had a laugh. And then we listened to it again, and we were like, hey, it's kind of good. And then we were like, the song's better this way.
It's a slippery slope, man. That's funny.
And then it's like, what if we do 5 songs like that? So none of those songs were meant to be done that way. They were all supposed to be kind of, bluegrass-ish. And instead, they're this weird thing.
Well, I wouldn't call it a weird thing. Like you said, I love that you kind of mentioned the Newgrass Revival throwback thing, because that's totally what it is now that you say it. There's that element is very strong in there. But I put you in the same league as like Stickley, and all these people now, because like the folks who have some appendage, foot, or whatever you want to call it, in the realm of bluegrass, but have like dared to go outside of that, you know what I mean, and recognize the rest of the world and the music that exists in it. Once again, no hate on the bluegrass crew, but it can be a very like insular community that way, right? Like when you start throwing that term bluegrass on something, if they hear a drum kit or a ripping Telecaster solo like you play on this record, then that gets it gets weird. My grandpa would have gotten up and walked out the back of the auditorium at that point in time.
We were
but
talking
that's awesome.
We were talking last night about our Spotify Wrapped and like our top artists and like our top songs. And me and you both had a lot of stuff on there that was not bluegrass.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of reflects what happened on the album. I will out myself right now. There's a lot of like 90s rock albums that were kind of transitioning towards this more like radio rock kind of thing. There was more production going on. And I think that a lot of those records are really, really interesting, where they still have this like rock attitude, but maybe there is like a little bit of like a choir or a string section, or maybe there's like 20 guitar parts all overlapped or whatever. There's this interesting thing that's very 90s and grungy still, but it's got all of this production behind it. And I know that people hate that because it ruined grunge and blah, 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 blah. But there's something really, really cool about that, like raw and produced thing happening at the same time. And so, in going to write this record, it's kind of going to come out a little bit raw no matter what, because it's so in between genres.
Yeah. And it's like, I love what you were kind of touching on there too. I can't escape this stuff with any of the projects I've been on. Like, you are what you eat. If you're listening to some of that stuff, you could have gone in to make an EDM record and it would have sounded like 90s,
yeah, right.
Like radio rock, because that's what you were listening to, Just out of curiosity, do you have some albums that, you would list as maybe influences or at least listen worthy from that kind of genre that were maybe on your playlist around that time?
Oh my God. We're so far out of the bluegrass canon. People are gonna go crazy.
Oh, yeah. But this is what Mandolin Secrets is all about, because if you remember, we do like bluegrass is less than a quarter of what we teach to our crew. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Nordic folk, Western swing, all this other kind of stuff. So I think we've got folks on board here.
Well, I think that one of the best examples of what I was trying to describe there is maybe the album Blue by Third Eye Blind. I think that album has the Vienna Boys Choir on it.
Yeah.
Which is like super weird, man. You turn that, there's one song, I think it's 10 Days Late, where the boys choir sings, and it's like super shocking. You're like, man, this is like in the middle of kind of this radio rock anthem thing. It's weird, super cool.
Yep.
Another one that's significantly more punk rock is an album called Something to Write Home About, and it's by the Get Up Kids. That were sort of this like, they're kind of this like pre-emo mall punk thing.
Yeah.
So they're once again kind of in this like beautiful transition point where they're very punk rock, but they're like leaning into the produced thing. Like they have a piano player. And so it's like molten. You're like, what is this? And
not punk, really man.
Cool. Yeah. And maybe we've hit on something that I didn't even realize, but a lot of these bands are kind of in transitional moments, and that's why I think they're so cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about Newgrass Revival. Like that is the transitional band of all transitional bands in the bluegrass or acoustic music world, right? But to dive into all that stuff, like I definitely, by the way, remember going to Target with my mom when I was in middle school to buy the Third Eye Blind Blue album. That definitely got worn out on my CD player. That's awesome.
Yeah, I have it. I think I had it on cassette.
Yeah, yes. This is why we're friends, Marcel. I love it, man. Man, there was one question that I wanted to ask you a bit ago, but we got so far down the album rabbit hole there that I got distracted by that. Well, anyway, my grandma would say that must have been a lie. You know what I mean? If I can't remember it. For those of you that are tuning in audio later after we recorded this podcast, by the way, I also want to say the person sitting across from me on this stream is talking about 90s radio rock and like Newgrass Revival, but he's also got a Randy Travis shirt on, and that is just like, oh, I love it, man. You know, I'm gonna love you forever, Marcel. Oh man,
I wore this just for you because last night when we talked, we mentioned Randy Travis. And I was like, for the interview, I'm gonna wear my Randy Travis tee.
Yeah, I just had to point that out, man. That's Randy's my boy. Oh, nice. We've got some comments coming into here from Karen, one of our like power members in the Mandolin Secrets group.
Hey, Karen.
She said, just got a couple guitar tabs from Marcel's site. I really like that there are options for each song after you receive them, just tabs, notation, and tabs, or just notation. So like Karen's picking up what you're putting down that way. We like options is what I'm hearing, Marcel.
Yeah, that was actually a big update that happened to the site at one point where I think originally the tabs are just whatever I happen to put up. So some of them I'd leave the sheet music if I thought it was useful, and some of them would just be tab. It was just a mixture because I read both, so I just post what's useful. And so when I had to go through, I had to go update, like 100 tabs, whatever it was at the time, to go make sure that everyone had choices. I'm glad you enjoyed that, Karen.
Yeah, it sounds like Marcel put quite a bit of work into that too. Having been inside of some notation software myself, I can understand what it would be like to re-edit 100 tabs or whatever. That's crazy. There was another one, a question in there that I wanted to ask about the tab stuff. Dang, I'm losing my track here today. There's just so much stuff to.
You're having such a good time.
Buddy. Yeah. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask too, because this is a question that I always get, and I like to open the floor for this. So I use MuseScore, the program, and like do sheet music and tab and that kind of stuff. But what software are you using? Because we've got Gearheads and app heads and all that kind of stuff out there.
Yeah, I use Guitar Pro.
Yeah.
And I really like Guitar Pro for a lot of its. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Guitar Pro. Actually, I do have an affiliate link, but like I'm not tight with Guitar Pro, just to say that.
But if you like Guitar Pro, maybe click on that link on Marcel's website, and get him $2.
I really like their export options. I think they have more features than any of the like free tab software. Their notation is also very editable. So I kind of wanted like a tab specific software since most people in the bluegrass community read tab. But I read sheet music too. Like I read traditional notation. So I want to be able to like edit that, make sure like rhythms and stuff are correct. Some tab softwares don't even do that.
Yep. Here's what I'll say to anyone out there who's interested in seeing this stuff. Marcel does these live streams. Once again, I'm going to remind you, if you're tuning in live with us today, Marcel's actually got a live stream later tonight, correct, Marcel?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, starts at 6.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, most of them it's like full screen tab and then a teeny Marcel in the bottom of the screen, just so we can still get that like your beautiful face in the
We
screen.
might have just recreated that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's so great. We got to figure out how
Do
to
you?
we can share your screens though, because that would have been.
I will share. I'll share one tip. I can't share my screen. I'll give you a different tip about transcribing. So
Yeah.
for me, I find it very intuitive because when I'm playing guitar as a righty, it's my left hand that's doing the fretting. So when I type in the numbers, I like to use my number keys across the top. I don't like to use the number pad because it feels wrong, right?
Yep.
And the other thing that I do, I think I
Oh,
showed you this one time.
No, you said it was in the mail, so I'm excited to see this.
Oh no,
right?
no! I didn't get that yet.
Oh no. Okay.
So you can see on my keyboard, I don't know if you can see down there, I've actually made some marks on the number keys here. And they're on 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, just like a guitar.
Ah.
So as I transcribe, I can just feel where the bumps are as if I would see fret markers on the guitar. And it keeps me from having to, it feels like a guitar when I tap.
This guy is using Braille guitar stickers on his keyboard, people, so he can transcribe more effectively. Once again, you're learning all the secrets here today. That's honestly, Marcel, that's an amazing idea, because that right hand, I always want to use my dominant hand to transcribe stuff when I'm like when I'm playing and I've got the guitar in my hands, but then you got to put the pick down, you got to do this, you got to do that, like I think you've got the workflow dialed in there, man. That's awesome. Well, buddy, we're coming up. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that is one tough thing about transcribing with your instrument, though. Like if you're writing in a computer, you have to keep putting things down. That might be a good excuse to, try writing stuff down without holding your guitar. I dare you.
Yeah. Well, and here's the deal. I will say this: the reasons that I just gave you, I actually don't ever transcribe with a guitar in my hands ever anymore. Which that's not like a flex or anything weird. It's just like, that was where I landed with that whole thing that we were talking about. Plus, I had all these teachers in grad school that were like, you should be able to do it solely by ear and know exactly where it is on your instrument and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, that's a great aspiration. Maybe I'll start working toward that. But after about I think it took 3 years of really concerted practice that way, I was able to just kind of move away from the instrument. I think the one thing I miss gets back to a point that you had mentioned a little while ago, though, that when you're working out these licks, finding those common licks between breaks and ones that you already know and stuff,
Yeah.
I feel like I did lose a little bit of that immediate fluency for putting those things into my playing, because I did not figure them out with the instrument in my hand. I would always go through and proof the transcription at the end and play it, but I don't think it's the same as if I had just sat there and played the licks back and forth with the recording,
Yeah. I find that there's still things that I like to have the instrument in my hand for, and they're kind of these little nitpicky things that bother me. Actually, one of the big ones is just where it's played on the instrument. You can play the same note in multiple places, and so sometimes you write down the correct notes in the wrong place.
Yep.
But another one that happens to me a lot is, in certain phrases you'll have these, especially descending lines on the guitar, that play the open G string, and then the next note they play is either an F on the D string or an E on the D string. And when the break is really, really quick, it is hard to tell if it's an F or an E.
Yep, I am right there with you. I have noticed that. Thanks, Tony Rice and Brian Sutton, and all you ridiculous, crazy fast players out there. That's why they play fast. It's not to impress us. It's so that we can't figure out their licks.
Well, I think it's funny on stream when I'm losing sleep about it. I'm I got to figure out what that note is. I'm sure there's people watching Marcel, we don't care. Either one is good. Just move on, dude.
Well, and I think that gets back to some of your point from earlier too, about the way that you transcribe music. If you start to me, that's when the blinders start coming on, and you start to just get really narrowly focused on one thing. And that's a dangerous kind of zone you can be in, because then what I want to say, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. So if you're stuck on that one note, you're not like moving forward in that transcription and getting the whole statement of whatever's being played there, right?
Yeah. Just put a question mark there and move on.
Yeah, that's like there's no like rule that says you can't come back to a note, right? Like,
yeah.
I love that. I usually put like a little asterisk above and a rest, you know what I mean, to take the space of that note. But yeah, there's probably a million ways to compensate for that. That's great, buddy. Well, man, I think we're getting at about the like 40-minute mark here. So I think we should start wrapping things up so these fine people can get on with their day. And so you, sir, can figure out which, transcriptions you're going to pass down to the masses in an oligarchical fashion, as we discussed earlier.
Yes.
But just before we get out of here, can you remind folks about when your Tuesday live streams are and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, right. So you can check out the Lessons with Marcel YouTube channel. You can check me out at lessonswithmarcel.com. The YouTube channel has live streams every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes we start a little bit earlier. Sometimes we start a little bit later.
Yeah, we're flexible here with the live streams. You got it.
I would say that's true with the new videos on the YouTube too. We just upload when it feels good, when it feels right.
Hey, man, to hand it down to the masses when you think they need it, It has nothing to do with the backlog of video editing or anything like that, right?
No, I don't even know what that means.
That's great. Well, folks, definitely check out Marcel's stuff. And like I said, if you want to get a better idea of how to transcribe, definitely tune into his live streams. Because I think a lot of people show up to that, right, Marcel? Like, oh, I'm going to like get a sweet new transcription from Marcel. But I think if you're really on this path to like figuring out your own music, you can really glean a lot from Marcel's process that he uses on these live streams. So I would highly, highly, highly suggest tuning into one of those Tuesday night live streams at 6 p.m. Eastern to check that out. Go to his website, buy all the tabs that you can, click on that affiliate link for Guitar Pro, and call it a day. All right. All right, Marcel, I got to say thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. It's a real honor to get to chat with you, my friend. And I know we've got a lot of good comments coming in here on Facebook, too. Oh,
man, it was a good time. Good time.
Great, buddy. All right, music makers, that about wraps it up for this episode of Mandolin Secrets Live. Head to mandolinsecrets.com/live for more information about the podcast. You'll also see a backlog of all of our episodes there. And yeah, that's it, people. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next show. And until then, stay inspired, be a music maker. Take it easy, y'all.